Philippine Coast Guard says two U.S. Navy warships were deployed off Scarborough Shoal following the collision of Chinese ships in the area. Ariela says U.S. ships were exercising navigational rights and freedoms in the West Philippine Sea in accordance with international law. USS Higgins and USS Cincinnati were monitored 30 nautical miles away from Scarborough Shoal on Wednesday, August 13.
China says two warships and aircraft forced a U.S. carrier group to turn back. The U.S. says it was a lawful freedom of navigation run and kept to international waters. Both can't be true, so what actually happened in those minutes off Scarborough Shoal? Stay with me. We'll break down the shadowing tactics, the radio calls, and the speed and course changes that decide who owns the immediate narrative without firing a shot. By the end, you'll read an AIS trace like a playbook, and know who really controlled the battle space. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great! Thank you so much. Now, back to the video.
Warship that entered Chinese waters. Chinese military claimed the USS Benford entered the waters without China's approval. It comes on the anniversary of an international court ruling that held Beijing had no claim over the South China Sea. The People's Liberation Army's Southern Theater Command said in a statement that the US warship seriously violated China's sovereignty.
They said a carrier group blinked. The track shows a leaner picture, two destroyers closing, a low pass overhead, and a set of radio lines that sounded like orders but functioned like stage cues. The scene sat off Scarborough Shoal, down a tight approach where sandbars and reefs pinched the water into narrow lanes. A new floating barrier stretched like a gate. A U.S. formation moved through under a freedom of navigation banner, steady speed, steady heading. The water was busy, but the choreography was deliberate. Then came the hail. China's line was simple: you are entering our waters. The US replied with a fixed phrase, operating where international law allows. These sentences are more than talk, they set the rules on the bridge. The question for you is practical: when both claim the right to be there, who bends first on the wheel? Watch the shadow move. One Chinese ship matched course on a parallel track, offset a few degrees off the US beam. The other eased forward to create a lead astern bracket. That bracket tightens the closest point of approach, click by click, without stepping onto a collision course. It's pressure by geometry. It's a hand on your shoulder, not a shove.
The Southern Theater Command said it mobilized the forces to monitor, issue warnings, and expel the destroyer USS Higgins, PRP Suluan, and performed a risky maneuver. This led to a collision between the China Coast Guard ship and a Chinese Navy warship. Zone enforcement in Scarborough Shoal, but the 2016 arbitral ruling declared the shoal a traditional fishing ground for the Philippines.
Now the ordering back starts. You hear scripted lines on VHF. The flyover arrives low and loud. A destroyer blares horn bursts. Those are not lawful commands to a foreign warship in open waters. They are signals meant to be heard by cameras, cut into clips, and replayed at home. It's theater with steel and jet noise. The sensors tell their own story, and what you don't see matters. AIS goes quiet at times. That tracks with MCAN habits, when ships dial down emissions to reduce their profile. When the dots reappear, speeds wobble by only a few knots, 1, 2, maybe 3. Those tiny changes are the seam between risk and safety. They create breathing room. They do not read like a sprint for the horizon. Look at the geometry like a driver reads an intersection. Overtaking and crossing have different duties under the rules of the road. If a ship is overtaking, it must keep clear; if crossing, the vessel on the right holds stand-on status. Within that, a commander can throw a 10-degree nudge and barely move the mission. On a satellite still, that nudge can look like a turn away. On a bridge plot, it's a courtesy that keeps metal from scraping.
In a statement, the Benfold asserts navigational rights and freedoms in the vicinity of the Paracel Islands consistent with international law. The PLA statement read, "We urge the United States to immediately stop such provocative actions." The Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague ruled that China had no historical title over the South China Sea.
This is where legal text meets hull and wake. Innocent passage allows continuous and expeditious transit. High seas freedoms protect navigation and overflight beyond narrow limits. A freedom of navigation run takes those words and writes them in spray and bearing lines. Routine becomes deterrence. U-turn writes into a route. Meanwhile, the Chinese narrative machine wants a moment. It needs a clip where a US ship yields. The bracket helps create that clip. The radio script supplies the lines. The flyover adds the flair. But the ship under pressure decides how to answer without saying a word, by holding speed, by adjusting half a degree, by letting a CPA widen while the track stays on mission. If you were on that bridge, what would you do? You'd watch CPA numbers roll on the screen. You'd call out bearing drift. You'd confirm who is stand on. Then you'd make the smallest change that solves the safety math and preserves the legal claim. That is seamanship. It's also strategy. There's a reason analysts pay more attention to CPA trends than to sound bites. A 1-knot trim and a slight rudder order can lift risk while signaling nothing about intent. AIS gaps hide the finesse. A stitched track later can tell a false story if you don't know why the gaps exist or what Mkin looks like at sea. The maneuver that mattered was not a hard turn home. It was a measured widening of CPA while the US kept the transit intact and the claim alive. Beijing got a headline. Washington kept the precedent. One side filmed drama. The other banked a norm it can use tomorrow. With the geometry locked in your head, we move to the law that carries those headings, and the limits that either protect a transit or strip it of meaning. Control the angles, keep the claim. That's how you win a close pass and set the next move. Geometry is leverage. Law is the shield. Hold both and you shape the board without firing. So what do you call that shift we watched? Comment your choice below, tactical retreat or disciplined spacing to preserve the FONOP? If you want more breakdowns like this, hit the subscribe button. Next, we go deeper. A full AIS to radar fusion of a destroyer blockade attempt. Track stitching, radar paints, timing on hails. The counter-move that unraveled it starts with a false gate, a baited lane, and a bow wave that gives the game away.